Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast. I'm Justin Dunk, joined by John Hodge and JC Abbott, who's convinced that he could get a hit off a major league pitcher in 100 at-bats.
Okay, just to clarify, I didn't say hit, I said make contact with the ball. It doesn't have to go forward. I'm saying I could get an accidental foul tip given 100 opportunities.
That
Not
is
a feat
amazing.
of athletic prowess. Complete
You're not
chance.
allowed to have the ball hit your face and move it forwards or backwards or your elbow or your leg or your big rear end. You actually would have to make contact with it with the bat head.
I wasn't planning to bat backwards and get my ass in the way.
I think your chances of getting a hit or even making contact would be the same regardless of how you stand with your bat.
At some point, if you swing the bat enough times, it's going to make contact with the ball.
That is factually true, yes. I'm not sure 100 is the amount you'd need. I'm thinking more
I
like
don't know if it's
1,000 or a million.
factually true. Depends who's swinging the bat, doesn't it?
Well, isn't there like an old fable that's like if given enough time, a group of untrained monkeys will produce all of Shakespeare's work? Like time is infinite. So I think an infinite
All probabilities.
amount, the probability of anything happening is like 100%. If it's infinite.
So if JC was immortal and he lived forever, he might get one hit off a major league pitcher.
Yeah,
If
I
I
could
was
see
a-
that. I could see
If I was immortal, there's in that realm of probability, I'm hitting a Grand Slam home run.
Grand Slam home
Immortality.
run.
With immortality in
Wow.
my favor, yes. Anything is possible there.
It's
I'm
like
saying in a finite mortal amount of time, I could probably get an accidental foul tip.
if Justin was immortal, there's a 100% probability that eventually he would eat a hot dog. Like eventually, like at some point he'd be like, I've tried everything else. I've lived for millions of years. There's almost nothing new to experience that I haven't done before. I'm putting some relish and some mustard. I'm eating this dog. That would happen.
If I'm jonesing for protein and there's nothing else but a hot dog around, then I will have one. But we should
Okay.
give some
Ooh.
context here. This baseball discussion came after I was letting JC know that there was lots of feedback on the internet and otherwise about JC's take that there's not Blue Jays fans outside of Toronto. And with them in the World Series,
I say there
looks like
wasn't
there's
Blue
lots
Jays
around the
fans
country.
outside
What do you
of
say
Toronto.
then? What did you say?
I
Set the
said
record
that
straight.
it's ridiculous to say that all Canadians have to be Toronto Blue Jays fans or
I
that
never
they're
said they have to
Canada's
be.
team. I'm saying that there are contingents of the country where there are significant amounts of the population that have rooting interests for other teams. And in fairness, I may have misjudged some of the ratio. For example, out here in Vancouver at the Lions game when Seattle
You did.
and Toronto were playing, they did a vote by applause, and I will say Toronto won that vote by applause, but there was still a significant number of people who were cheering for Seattle in that matchup, and I don't think they are any less Canadian for doing so, because frankly, I think the idea of the Blue Jays being Canada's team is absurd.
I never said that every Canadian has to be a Blue Jays fan.
No, but
And
you
I
suggested
get
that they were
in
Canada's
BC,
team.
Yes, because there's more Jays fans in Canada than any other Major League Baseball team. I think that's a given.
Well, so your benchmark for being Canada's team is the team with the most fans in a given country.
Yes.
So if for example, I'm not a soccer guy either, if Liverpool had statistically the most fans in Canada at 15%, they would become Canada's soccer team, in your mind.
Yeah, like isn't that how the Dallas Cowboys got the moniker America's team?
I also think that's a ridiculous claim that they made. But to me, that just doesn't vibe
What other
with me.
factual data do you want to back up something being Canada's team, I suppose?
I'll add something here. And I'll also just say to our listeners, if you don't want to hear us talk about this, there's a fast forward button because I can already see the tweets and the comments. People are like, talk about the CFL. We are just
No,
press
the comments
fast
are going to
forward.
come fast and furious at JC.
They
Go
probably
on,
will.
Hodge.
I would suggest that to be quote unquote Canada's team, you have to be the most popular team in the country, but you also have to meet like a certain threshold, right? Like if
I would
not
agree
at
with
least 50% of baseball fans have the Jays as their favorite team in Canada, then I think calling them Canada's team is a little bit silly, right? Like Liverpool at 15% in this hypothetical, I would not call them Canada's soccer team. But if they had over 50%, then I don't think it's inappropriate. I do think it's appropriate personally to call Toronto Canada's team. I also don't think it's un-Canadian for someone to say, hey, I got an MLB team 90 minutes south of me and I go see them 12 times a year and I'm going to cheer for them regardless of who they're playing against. I think that's perfectly fine. But maybe that's just the Manitoba boy in me wanting everyone to get along.
I also think it's easy for people, exactly as Hodge laid out in BC, JC, to cheer for Seattle. So I think it sounds like more Jays fans in BC, perhaps than Mariners fans, will need a poll to correct this or make sure that's
at the Lions
correct.
Game with a unofficial vocal poll, it seemed that way. But in fairness, to your point about Canada's team, the Jays do have some ties to BC because the Vancouver Canadians are a minor league affiliate of theirs. They play out here. They get great support, great atmosphere out here in Vancouver. If you like to watch grown men run around in slacks and fail to hit a baseball.
JC seems to think that it's not athletic enough to be able to hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball or be able to go out and golf on a golf course and control that white ball all around, or
I didn't
the
say
great
it's not
things that
athletic
Tiger
enough.
Woods did. That's what you said. That's what you intimated. Wearing slacks.
There is absolutely an athletic element to it. I just think there's also a high degree of chance, and I think there's a lot of downtime that is not necessarily athletic in it as well, which makes it unentertaining for me to watch. I prefer, if baseball was full contact, I would be a fan and at every one of the 162 games that they play every single year, which is a ridiculous number, by the way.
That is true. There is actually a lot of contact. I'd like to hear how your
body feels after 162 regular season MLB games.
But there are some really crazy collisions. Like if you're coming around third base, you're running for home, and you got the catcher in your way. Like there are massive hits in baseball. Though I appreciate that they're obviously less common than football. To me, I'll just throw in my 2 cents here. It makes no difference to me how much downtime there is, if like in terms of defining whether it's a sport or not. But it will define it whether or not I play it. If there's no opportunities to rest and catch your breath, that is not a sport I'll play. I'll never play soccer. But if you get the chance to play a little bit and then catch your wind, I'm down. So for me, I'll play golf, I'll play baseball, I'll play football. But yeah, the sports you have to constantly run around, no breaks. No, you will not catch me there.
I will say,
Hodge, you would not have come with me to do the 32-minute AMRAP workout, high rock style that I did at CrossFit Regina.
I would have happily done the 3.2-minute workout at CrossFit Regina.
Oh, I will say this. I think baseball is one of the best games to go and watch in a stadium because most sports, you get 1 or 2 opportunities to go and get food. Baseball, there's 9 innings. You can get something in between every one. I like to get a little snack in each inning break. It's a full smorgasbord when Abbott goes to a baseball game.
I'd like to see some more healthy options at a baseball game. There's not very many green options on the menu. I'm serious, man. I go there and I'm like, what am I going to eat? What am I going to eat? I feel like I'm not being spoken for in terms of the options on the menu. I can't think of the right phrasing right now.
So when you go to Major League Baseball games, there's not nutritious enough food for you. That sounds a little elitist. I'm just going to say.
It's a facts, bro. That's how I feel.
It's like the first world problem of all first world problems.
Justin Dunk is campaigning for more salad at the World Series. That's what this
just
podcast
at least
has evolved into.
One salad option.
There has to be at least one healthy option somewhere.
No, bro. I've been to multiple Jays games this year, and there is no salad options at any of their new fancy spots in the ballpark. Now, I wasn't in a suite, so perhaps that's where you need to go to get some salad.
I wonder if
most
maybe
of their
that's
fans
because
are rabbits.
Nobody wants salad at baseball games.
Here's a bag of rotting lettuce. It's been here for all 162 games. No one has ordered it until Justin Dunk showed up.
Yum, yum, yum. All right, boys, let's talk some football. We're discussing the Ottawa Redblacks firing head coach Bob Dyce.
And who could replace him?
The Edmonton Elks facing a decision with Trey Ford.
Controversial Week 21 officiating calls in the CFL.
CFL attendance raising slightly in 2025.
A shocking upset in the OUA playoffs.
Come on. Some people thought that was going to happen. Chris Streveler suffering what appeared to be a serious leg injury. But first, the East semifinal is set as the Winnipeg Blue Bombers will visit the Montreal Alouettes as the crossover team. No crossover team has ever reached the Grey Cup, which the Bombers will look to do with the CFL title game being played at Princess Auto Stadium on, Sunday, November 16th? Is that right?
That's correct.
Winnipeg swept the 2-game season series against Montreal, though the Owls didn't have franchise quarterback and team MLP Davis Alexander in the lineup for either contest. Hodge, can Winnipeg get the upset, or will the Alouettes advance to visit the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the East Final?
Well, first of all, it's ridiculous that Davis Alexander didn't play this week at Princess Auto Stadium. I mean, Jason Moss made it very clear when speaking to our guy, Pablo Herrera Vargara. He's like, Davis isn't a 5-year vet. He needs to play. And that quote stuck out to me because it's like, well, Davis is a 4-year vet. Like, that's pretty close to a 5-year vet, but whatever. You can play him. Well, Judy Owen, my colleague and reporter in Winnipeg, longtime for the Canadian Press, spoke to Moss after the game, and he said, well, Alexander's dealing with like a little tiny issue. We just thought it was better to hold him out of the lineup. Now, the Alouettes apparently also didn't make McLeod Bethel-Thompson available because someone told me he was busy throwing his helmet at the wall and screaming after the game. I guess he was really upset about how he played. I will caveat that statement by saying I did not personally witness this. This is something that somebody witnessed and told Judy about it, who told the rest of us post-game, which was interesting, to say the least. Regardless, I do think that the Montreal Alouettes are in a good position to win this game. Obviously, they're at home for the East semifinal. And because they didn't have Davis for the 2 games against Winnipeg, I don't look at the Bombers as having any type of upper hand here. Coming in off those regular season meetings. Postseason-wise, I'm worried about Winnipeg's ability to protect Zach Collaros in this game. Montreal's defensive front, I talked to Micah Vanterpool, who started at left tackle for the Bombers on Saturday, said those guys are dogs. They work super hard. They have a great rotation, keeping everybody fresh. I mean, yeah, when you look at the depth they have there. Now, Mustafa Johnson did get hurt, should be noted. His status unclear for the East Semi.
Lowell Uguak too.
Lowell Uguak as well. So that is something to follow along this week. That could hurt the Alouettes. That being said, I am kind of bullish, at least on Winnipeg's defense. I mean, Winnipeg's defense, I think, kind of quietly finished first in the CFL in offensive points allowed. And when you look at their last 5 games, this team went 4-1 in their last 5 games. They did not allow more than 20 offensive points in any of those games. They didn't allow more than 18, including just 26 over the last 2 weeks. Part of that is the quarterbacks that they played, Jake Mayer, then McLeod Bethel-Thompson, who had a poor performance. We've seen McLeod have brilliant performances this year. That was not one of them at Princess Auto Stadium. So I do think that Winnipeg can advance. I'm guessing the Alouettes are going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 point favorites here. I think that's deserved. And I think I am going to pick the Alouettes to win this game, but I do think it's going to be close. I'm a little worried for the Alouettes in terms of just the fact that Davis Alexander's never played against Jordan Younger's defense. The Winnipeg's, their defense is certainly the strength of their team. But we'll have to wait and see. I like Montreal's chances, but I think this is going to be close. And from the kind of quick informal polling I've done from people around the league whose word I trust, they seem to be pretty split on this. I have yet to talk to somebody who thinks, oh, the Alouettes are going to win it in a walk. A lot of people think it's going to be close, and I have talked to people who think that the Bombers can and even will win this game.
I think you make some compelling points, Hodge, in terms of the Bombers' defense and how good they've been over this last little stretch. And I think there are concerns with the Montreal Alouettes in terms of injuries that you can point to say this game is going to be close. But there are 2 things that stand out to me as counterpoints to your argument. First of all, that stretch for the Winnipeg defense, yes, they've beaten some good teams in there. The blowout win over the Hamilton Tiger Cats certainly comes to mind. But the last couple of weeks, I don't know that you take at full value a victory over Saskatchewan when they're resting everyone, where they barely eked it out, and a win over a Davis Alexander-less Montreal Alouettes team, right? That is not a full-strength opponent, and the fact that you held them to as few points as you did does not impress me very much, to be entirely frank. I think that should be the expectation against those opponents and those quarterbacks in those circumstances. So that takes a little bit of the shine off of Winnipeg's defensive accomplishments, even if I still think that they're a strong unit. But on the other side, what have we seen from the Winnipeg offense that makes you believe that even if this is a strong defensive game, that they're going to do enough to be able to get past Montreal. Right now, I don't trust Zach Collaros. I don't trust their protection. I don't trust their play calling, to be entirely frank. We've seen them occasionally have bursts of energy or flashes of brilliance, but it has not been in any way, shape, or form consistent throughout this season. I think they've got some serious fatal flaws, and against a good Montreal defense, a very good Montreal defense, in fact, and Davis Alexander, who should be able to put up points offensively, even against a strong Winnipeg defense, I don't think they've got the horses to get it done right now. You could give it to Brady Oliveira if the defense controls the pace and you're able to grind it out on the ground. I think there's a path there. But if Davis is able to open it up even just a little bit, I don't think the Bombers can keep up.
There's so much to look at with this game. I think you guys have done a great job breaking it down, and I'll just make it simple. Okay, when Davis Alexander plays for this Montreal Alouettes football team, starts and finishes games, he hasn't lost. There was even a game that he led a comeback where he came into halfway through last year against the Riders and hasn't got a credit for that win. Quarterback wins is a topic for another day, but I think that to me is really what this comes down to. And then also the fact that Davis Alexander has been far better at taking care of the football in 2025 compared to Zach Collaros. I get that Collaros has played more games, but he still has 17 interceptions in 13 starts, or at least 13 games dressed. You know, it's hard to believe some of these CFL stats at this point in time. Davis Alexander, 8 games dressed, 3 interceptions. So I think that's the real key here for me. And then you consider the fact that Noel Thorpe is going to have that defense swarming. And he usually cooks up some unique blitzes, exotic blitzes, whatever you want to say. And Percival Molson Stadium is going to be buzzing. Air horns or not, or other noise-making objects, I'm sure, will be brought into the stadium by the fans. So that's where I see it. If Zach Collaros can protect the football, then the Bombers have a chance. But the Alouettes have literally been unbeatable with Davis Alexander at quarterback. I'm not saying that the Bombers can't go in there and lose, because anything can happen in sports. Literally anything can happen in a one-off game.
Like
so there's a chance that Winnipeg could
a
win.
foul ball along 100 pitches. Anything can happen, right?
Not if JC Abbott is at the plate, but pretty much anything else.
The Winnipeg Blue Bombers actually did not commit the most turnovers in 2025. And the only reason for that is the Ottawa Redblacks threw 6 interceptions this week. It looks like the final tally is going to be 45 turnovers or giveaways for the Blue Bombers, 46 for the Ottawa Redblacks. We'll get the stats through week 21. Hopefully by Monday. We're recording this on Sunday.
Can we just talk about that for a second?
Yeah,
you
lame.
Put Matthew Schultz in the game.
Boy.
Why? And then he throws 4 interceptions. Like, what a great way to go out. Nice send-off to Bob Dyce.
A fitting farewell.
And coaches around the league will say, this is the last point I'll make, there is no other thing that you can do, for lack of a better term, outside of game reps, especially for a young quarterback to develop. So when Tyree Adams looks like he might have something and you got some decisions to make, no, you're like, I'm going to go back to the guy that we benched earlier in the season, hasn't seen the field for, I've lost count of however many weeks. Like, talk about making no sense to me. The Redblacks deserve to be at the bottom of that takeover or giveaway list, excuse me.
Yeah, if this was supposed to be a send-off for Matthew Schultz, if he's going to retire at the end of the year, which seemed to be the implication that Tyree Adams made on the broadcast, well, give him a series at the end of the game. Give him the chance to kneel it out or do something of that nature. You have fundamentally undermined that football team and that organization by denying a half of development for a young quarterback. And I'm not saying Tyree Adams is going to be the guy there. I'm not saying he's even going to be in Ottawa next season. But you had 30 extra minutes where you could have helped make that determination. Where at the most important position in all of sports, you could have gotten more information, gotten another look, seen something that could have helped you make that decision. Instead, you gave those valuable minutes to somebody who it sounds like not only will you not re-sign, nobody's going to re-sign next year. So there's no value added to that. Plus, he stunk out the joint.
We are completely off topic, but while we're here, I'll add in my 2 cents. I'm not opposed to the Red Blacks giving Matthew Schultz the final kneel down, something like that, as a little tribute to, what he's done. But also, you could just say, suck it. This is professional football. We're playing to win, and we're trying to get reps for Tyree Adams. Like, if you want a storybook finish to your career, go to Disneyland or do something. Like we don't
or
owe
win
you.
football games.
Yeah,
the only people that deserve a send-off like that are the great players.
This is professional
Not
football.
Matthew Schultz, who's a less than 500 quarterback.
We're playing to win. That we're playing to win the game. We are not here to try to help people live out a late career fantasy. So I wouldn't have been offended if Matthew Schultz was in
Matty Schultz is going to retire. We better give him some participation time to end his career. Could you imagine if every player got that in the Canadian Football League?
I think JC should get that at the end of the World Series. Put him in for the last. Put him in for the last.
I guarantee you, if you gave me a half in the CFL at quarterback, I'd throw at least as many interceptions as Matthew Schultz.
I believe that. Getting back on topic, the Bombers threw 27 interceptions this season. That's the most in the CFL. And I think when you can have the second most giveaways and the most interceptions, and you can still finish with a winning record, that says a lot of good things about the rest of your team. Like Winnipeg can run the ball, their defense is tops, and obviously Trey Vavil's had a great job, done a great job returning the ball all season. Now, the Alouettes also have the best cover teams in the CFL, so I like their chances of at least limiting Vavel. But regardless, I think this is going to be a good game. The one thing I do want to kind of address, though, is people, every time there's a crossover, it's like, oh, well, no crossover team's ever made it. It's like, I think that isn't because it's impossible to make it as a crossover team. I think it's just because the crossover team is, by definition, the 4th best team in one division. And they have to go on the road to play against the 2nd and then 1st best team in the other division. Like the Riders came one play away from making it to the Grey Cup as the crossover in 2017. I don't think it's impossible to make the Grey Cup as a crossover. It's just, and by the way, the Bombers have played in the East Division for 21 seasons over 3 different stints. Like I grew up with the Bombers playing in the East. Them going from Manitoba, which is equidistant to Montreal as it is to Vancouver, I don't see as an obstacle. But again,
that's
I won't
a
be
big
surprised
word
if they make it. Yeah, I know lots of big words. I read books. It's good. It's good to read books and learn things.
Better than salad.
Yes. I eat
talking
salad
about here?
for my brain.
Salad's great brain food.
Salad is
know
not
that's
brain
true.
food. Salad is rabbit food.
You
I
need
think we
protein
talked
for the brain,
the East semifinal.
like hot dogs.
Let me just make one more point because Hodge,
ahead.
you sort of alluded to it. If the Bombers commit to running the football and can consistently do so, I think that goes a long way. Well, we
Yes.
haven't seen that this season for whatever reason. It took Brady Oliveira having a meeting with his offensive coordinator, Jason Hogan, who was also his former position coach, to say, hey, you might want to give the reigning MOP and MOC a little bit more touches here, especially when you lost Kenny Lawler in free agency and then Dalton Jones out for the season.
One thing I'll add to that really quick, and I hesitate to say it because we're still 6 days away as of this recording, but right now, the weather forecast for the East semifinal, 8 degrees, full clouds, and rain. So if I'm the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, I'm spending the next 6 days doing a rain dance at Princess Auto Stadium to try to get the worst possible conditions. Because if this comes down to the one team's ability to run the football against the other, I really like Winnipeg's chances. Montreal's ground game is fine. It exists, but it's not as good as Winnipeg's. So
Well,
if
it
I'm
should
the
be
Bombers,
noted
go ahead.
that ground game could be even further limited because it doesn't sound like Travis Tice is ready to go yet. And Stevie Scott got hurt in that game against Winnipeg. That would presumably leave it to Tyon Evans to be the starting running back, making his first career start. If Scott is unable to go, that would
Get him in the trainer's
tilt
table,
things in
shoot him
Winnipeg's
up,
favor.
and they'll be good.
I agree. I think they'll be good, but it's a good
Destroy
point.
his liver.
And obviously, we'll have to keep track. Weather forecasts can change, obviously. But right now, it
JC,
looks
why
like
do you
it's
care
gonna be
about
kind of
livers?
ugly.
You don't care about people's heads
You need livers. I care about their
or
heads.
knees.
That's
You don't care about people's knees.
You don't need
Sorry,
a
I got
need
it
to
wrong.
live. You need a head to live, and you need a liver to live. This is a fact.
I don't want to go into any more doctor talk. Do you actually need a full liver to live?
Can a liver
I think
regenerate to some extent or grow back to some
Yeah,
extent?
that's what I thought.
I think you. Well, yeah, I think you can take part. We're not scientists. We should not be discussing
Yes.
livers
Legal
Doctors,
disclaimer. Nothing said on this podcast is medical advice.
or athletic advice, to be entirely
Or
frank.
really
because I'm
advice on
trying to hit
anything
fastballs.
ever. The West semifinal is set as the Calgary Stampeders will visit the BC Lions in Vancouver, where Vernon Adams Jr. will face his former team. The Lions swept the season series with 2 one-sided victories, including a 52-23 drubbing at McMahon Stadium in September and a 38-24 win at BC Place Stadium in early October. Can the Stamps beat BC for the first time this year, or will the Lions advance to the West Final against the Saskatchewan Roughriders?
I love this matchup because of the storyline with Vernon Adams Jr. coming back to BC. I think that's going to eat up a lot of attention this week. I'm sure he's going to be fired up and looking for redemption after not playing particularly well when these two teams saw each other the 2 previous times this season. But this game, in my mind, heavily skews in favor of the BC Lions. They are the hottest team in the CFL right now, and they have a quarterback in Nathan Rourke who is playing at another level entirely. He is out of this world and at the top, the very tip top of his game. I think that gives them an advantage that is impossible to quantify. Add into that the fact that this game is going to be in BC Place, where it's going to be a rocking crowd. Amar Doman has invested in this franchise. We've seen attendance tick up regularly. People are showing up for these big time games. And I think this atmosphere against Calgary and a recognizable name in VA is going to be absolutely exceptional. That's going to fire up the Lions even more. And I will say this, gentlemen, in the history of the BC Lions, they have never lost a West semifinal that they have hosted. That includes the last 2 against the Calgary Stampeders, albeit with a different quarterback at the helm. I think this is a game that the Lions can mop up so long as they don't get caught looking ahead to Saskatchewan, which I think is a risk. Buck Pierce is going to have to keep these guys focused to execute.
If I'm the BC Lions, yes, I can agree with you, JC, that BC is the hottest team in the CFL right now, 6 straight wins. And I find it wild that their last loss, do you remember who it was against?
Oh, I got to go back in time. Was it the one against Hamilton? No. Oh, the one against Ottawa to Dustin Crum. Yes.
In Ottawa, I believe that game
Crumback.
took place. So when I'm looking at the Lions at the moment, there is no doubt to me that Nathan Rourke is playing the best football of any quarterback in the Canadian Football League. I think Bo Levi Mitchell and Trevor Harris are right there. But what Rourke can do on the ground and also ad-libbing, like that flip pass to Keon Hatcher in the end zone, which I know Rider fans don't want to hear, but was actually a catch, was the stuff of MOP legend. Okay, you go back 2 weeks ago, that 70-yard touchdown run against Edmonton, pulling away from multiple defenders in a key game down the stretch to get your team a home playoff game, that adds to the lore, okay? Nathan Rourke, for anybody that needs to hear it, is the MOP in 2025 in the Canadian Football League. But if I'm the rest of the Lions on that team, I'm a little bit worried because that game against Saskatchewan was much closer than it should have been. I get that there were some key plays that happened, and we're going to touch on it a little later on Hatcher trying to reverse jam the ball into the end zone. Like, what are you trying to do? So we'll save that for later. But BC is hot, and I just have a hard time. I'm not saying that it can't happen, but I have a hard time seeing Vernon Adams Jr., who has a 1-3 playoff record, kicking it up a notch because we've seen the Vernon Adams Jr. MO throughout his career. Starts hot and fades fast. So that is what he is battling against this week with the Calgary Stampeders. I think the Stamps have a shot to go in there and win it, but BC is definitely the decided favorite in this game going in there for multiple reasons. And a couple among them is that Nathan Rourke absolutely carved up that defense in Calgary. Like, carved them with a dull knife. It wasn't even sharp. Like, he carved that unit. I know they're probably going to be sick of hearing it by the time that the Stamps defense gets to BC Place on Saturday, but it's just hard to see BC losing that one at home. JC, you had the history there, and with all the tickets that are flying off Ticketmaster or wherever else they're being sold, like that building, I hope for Mardoman's sake, is sold out because he hosted the Grey Cup last year. BC didn't even have a home playoff game. He's invested in his franchise. I think he deserves this. So let's see if the Lions can reward him with a home playoff game win.
Yeah, right now, looking at areas where I would give Calgary the advantage coming in this game, there's only one spot, and that is running the ball. And that is not counting Nathan Rourke's prowess, because BC is actually got the best average rush per attempt in the CFL. I think that's a little inflated by Rourke and some of the big plays he's had. I think Dedrick Mills maybe scares you a little more coming out of the backfield than James Butler, though James Butler's also had a very good season. Literally everywhere else, I give the advantage to the BC Lions. Sean White has been the better kicker. Seven McGee's been a little more impactful in the return game. Obviously, Nathan Rourke is, I think, at this point, the MOP. Vernon Adams Jr., solid season, but not as sharp in the second half as the first half. Calgary's vaunted pass rush with Flarner Malade and Jalen Hutchings, who got absolutely, completely 100% robbed of most outstanding defensive player. We'll talk about that more later in the show. Hasn't been the same the second half of the year with Flo out with the Achilles injury, whereas the BC Lions, who had little to no pass rush for the first half of the season, have had guys like Levi Bell and Bradley Ane come in and completely open things up for Matthew Betts, who had one of the best half seasons in CFL history by a pass rusher. And obviously TJ Lee, I think, has done a nice job coming in and really securing that secondary with guys like Ronald Carter Jr. getting the opportunity to continue growing and developing. So to me, all three levels of the defense, I give the advantage to BC. Special teams, it's BC. Offense, again, I think the run game, a little bit Calgary's way, but I think the Stamps are really in tough this week. Could they win this game? Yes, absolutely. It's the CFL. I could see the Calgary Stampeders going into BC. They're going to need to win the turnover margin by a couple. I think they're going to need a big return at some point, and they're going to need Vernon Adams Jr. to be completely clean. He doesn't have to throw for 300 yards, but he has to be completely clean, make good decisions with the football. If he goes into BC, forces the ball into traffic early, like this one could get ugly. So I think Calgary can win this game, but I'm expecting this to be something like BC -8. And honestly, I like BC's chances of covering that spread.
Yeah, to me, the formula for the Calgary Stampeders to win this game is similar to what you laid out. I think Dedrick Mills has to have a huge night on the ground. And in order to do that, you need to force Nathan Rourke to make some mistakes, because for as good as he's been, and he is the definitive, without question, MOP in my mind, and anyone who doesn't think so is crazy, he does take a lot of risks that comes with his playmaking ability, and sometimes he puts the football too readily in harm's way. Even against Calgary in some of these games, he threw some bad interceptions, and I think if you're able to pin him in the pocket, similar to what the Saskatchewan Roughriders did for stretches in last night's game, where they were able to get a full four-man rush where everyone was staying in their lane and pinning Rourke, getting pressure on that offensive line and pushing everybody back collectively, giving him no escape routes. I think you can force him to maybe press a little bit and to make some of those mistakes. And if you do that and you protect the football and can grind it out with Mills, then there's a path to victory. But the risk when you're a running team is always the same. It's that if you're a running team, you don't get to dictate if you're going to run the football. The other team, by virtue of scoring or not scoring, dictates that game plan. And if Nathan Rourke throws 4 touchdowns the way that we know he's capable of and has those big plays and keeps that explosive BC offense going, then that's going to take the control out of Calgary's hands. And they're not going to be able to hand it to Mills as many times as they'll like. And that will put the pressure on Vernon Adams Jr. to go shot for shot with Nathan Rourke, when we know that sometimes he can get caught making mistakes when he's pressing. So the path to victory for Calgary is there. I think it's a narrow tightrope that they have to walk.
Hodge, 2 corrections. It's Robert Carter Jr., not Ronald. And the Lions are already out, bro.
Ronald
The
Kent
BC
Jr.
Lions are 4.5-point favorites at home for the West semifinal, as are the Montreal Alouettes. Now, We are recording on Sunday, so those lines could change. I hear, sometimes after you guys record, people are like, well, that's not the point spread. It's like, at the time when you're recording, that's what the point spread was. So I'm actually a little surprised it's not higher, even though Hodge was thinking it would be around -8.
I think it'll go up. Like I fair enough that it's 4.5 now. Like the game just got settled yesterday.
That's going to take a lot of money to push it to 8, though.
Fair, but then I guess I'm saying there's good value if it doesn't move that much. And my apologies. Ronald Carter is a legendary jazz bassist. Robert Carter Jr., my apologies.
Yeah, I would think the line would be closer to what Hodge said as well. I'm surprised it's 4.5. To me, all the value is with the lines there. I do not see a way where the Calgary Stampeders lose this one close. To me, that's not in the cards. They're going to lose it big, or they're going to eke out a narrow victory. I think you take the lines to cover that spread and make some easy money.
I think by guaranteeing that
winning.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, by guaranteeing that it's not going to be a close BC win, I think JC just guaranteed it's going to be a close BC win.
Anything can happen, JC. Don't guarantee that in a playoff game. Calgary's path to victory, to me, is pretty simple. You need to score early, get the lead, and then run the football with Dedrick Mills. Like, that's the simple part. I think Hodge's point is smart. Vernon Adams Jr. needs to play clean football. But this team was at its best early in the season when Vernon Adams Jr. was, playing clean football here and there. He wasn't even the cleanest to start the year. But when the offense had a lead, they could lean on Dedrick Mills, who's been really good for that team.
Won the rushing title.
The rightful MOP pick. Yeah, won the rushing title. Rightful MOP pick for that team. I don't know how people even talked about Vernon Adams Jr. being in that conversation to start the season, but that's another conversation. And lean on the defense. The defense has shown that when they have a lead, they can play much better. Now, Jalen Hutchings hasn't played to the level in the second half that he did in the first half, but if he can find that again without Flo or Malade in the lineup, that would really help the Stamps' chances.
I don't even know necessarily that is entirely true. Has his production been the same? Has he had the same number of flash plays? No, not necessarily. But I think Jalen Hutchings is still the same effective down-to-down player. The problem is when you remove a presence like Flo or Malade from the lineup, now the thing that we were banging on the drum all season for other teams to do, which is just triple team Jalen Hutchings, teams can actually do it now, right? Like, he is getting a higher percentage of those double teams. He's getting ground down a little bit more. He's still opening up opportunities for guys like Clarence Hicks. I think the analytics and the grading will show that he's the best defensive tackle in the CFL and still has been over this stretch. I think just losing a guy like Flo inherently changes the way teams are able to scheme for that defensive line and puts him in a tougher spot.
Do you want to go off on your rant about the MODP for Calgary?
We've got that in the 3-minute drill, so I feel like we can't hit it twice.
I thought you might want a little more time for it.
Well, to me, I'll do it this one now, and then I'll touch on another one during that segment. How about we do that? It is utterly ridiculous that the single best defensive player in the CFL this year, Jalen Hutchings, is not even his team nominee for most outstanding defensive player. Like, Clarence Hicks has been really good. I am not disputing that. I think he's been easily a top 5 defensive end in the CFL this year. I think he's been wildly effective, a breakout star. Hutchings is in a class unto himself. And if you cannot see that, I don't know how to explain it to you. This guy eats up blocks. He splits double teams. 8 sacks. Even if you're just going on the pure raw statistics, 8 sacks as a defensive tackle is more impressive than 11 sacks as a defensive end. That's just a fact. Your job is tougher. It's harder to get sacks from that position. I think this was a serious mistake, a miscarriage of justice by the voters in Calgary, because not only should Jalen Hutchings be their team nominee for most outstanding defensive player, he should be the West Division finalist, and he should win the damn award. We are going to be in a situation where, and I'll explain the second half of this when we get to it later, my top 2 candidates for most outstanding defensive player are going to be unable to win this award. To me, that fundamentally undermines the entire thing. The Ottawa Redblacks fired head coach Bob Dyce following a 4-14 season that saw the team miss the playoffs for the 5th time in the last 6 seasons. The Winnipeg native finished his tenure as head coach in the nation's capital with a regular season record of 21, 45, and 1, and an 0-1 record in the playoffs. Dunk, who could be the team's next head coach?
There's a list that I'll let my colleague John Hodge get into here, but I want to shout out a couple people first because I met Guy in Saskatchewan when the Toronto Argonauts were playing there. He was on a father-son trip with his son Jono. We were talking in the cafe at Hotel Saskatchewan, and he was a huge fan of the pod. Like, he literally looked over and he didn't want to bother me, and I was like, man, I'll talk ball with anyone at any time. So we were chopping it up. Eventually I had to go because I was going to potentially miss my flight back. But nonetheless, what Guy was most intrigued with was our discussion on that previous podcast leading into that week where the Argos went out to Saskatchewan about the possibility of Ryan Dinwiddie going to Ottawa. Now, it seems like, at that point, and even now, that it's a lot of people talking a big move behind the scenes and probably more of a rumor. But I still think that that's the direction that Ottawa at least needs to investigate. Sean Burke could take a VP of football type role, make Dinwiddie the GM and the head coach, and bring it in there. And I think it could make all kinds of sense for that team if OSEG is really about winning. Pay the guy, bring him down there. To me, that is the one that should smack the Ottawa Redblacks in the face. There are some other quality candidates on here, but none more qualified than a guy who has won 2 Grey Cups with the Toronto Argonauts, who, as we all know, aren't necessarily that well supported by MLSE. So I think that would make a whole lot of sense, at least just to even find out if it's a possibility.
I think the odds of that happening plummeted when the Redblacks made it clear that Sean Burke is returning as general manager, but you never know. Crazier things have happened. And I agree that Ryan Dinwiddie should be at the top of Ottawa's wish list. Ryan Dinwiddie has proven that he can win Grey Cups. He's proven that he can finish first place. And he has proven that he can do it with quarterbacks who have never previously had success in the CFL. Like, this is a guy who brought McLeod Bethel-Thompson to new heights. He's a guy who turned Chad Kelly into an MOP. He's a guy who turned Nick Arbuckle into a Grey Cup MVP and a good season-long starter. Like, the Argonauts did not make the playoffs this year. It was not because their quarterbacking was bad. Like, Nick Arbuckle, he had a rough start near the end there, but by and large was rock solid this season. There's a lot of teams in the CFL who I think would have done better if they had a quarterback playing at Nick Arbuckle's level, right? That said, we have released a list, or a comprised a list, we're going to be releasing it soon, of other head coaching candidates, and I'll run through them quickly. I think one you have to look at is Orlando Steinauer, who's currently the president of football operations in Hamilton, a job that I'm not saying he can't do, but is a bit of an odd fit given that he is a football guy through and through. He's been a head coach. He coached the Hamilton Tiger Cats to a 15-3 season in 2019. One of the assistants
Burke was there.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Right?
While Sean
that's
Burke was
tie-in.
one of the assistant general managers. I think that was his title at the time, but their structure was very strange at that time. Regardless, there's a strong relationship there. Henry Burris, I think, is a guy you have to look at. He's been coaching in the FCS the last few years in Florida, at Florida A&M, where they've had a lot of success. Obviously, he's not maybe the most experienced coach, but he's a guy who's a local legend in Ottawa, brought that team a Grey Cup as a quarterback in 2016. Rick Campbell's currently on staff. He's a guy who's won a Grey Cup in Ottawa. Is Rick Campbell the most dynamic out-of-the-box candidate? No, he's probably the most in-the-box candidate you could hire. That said, he's proven he could have success, and I don't think that it was a coaching issue when the Redblacks hit the skids in 2019 in his last year there. I think it was a talent issue. They did not have a quarterback that year, and I think that's the reason why things didn't work out for Rick Campbell there. So some other names, I think you have to include Mike O'Shea, just because he's a pending free agent. Do I think he's going to go to Ottawa? No, but the Red Blacks should certainly be trying to get Mike O'Shea if he's available. Mark Mueller, arguably the top offensive coordinator in the CFL right now. Pat Delmonico, who's done some very nice work in Calgary, bringing that team back to relevancy in 2025. Iron Archambault, French-Canadian, which is always a plus in Ottawa, who's done great work in the coaching and personnel side for the Montreal Alouettes, currently serving not only a personal role with them, but also their special teams coordinator. They got the best special teams units in the league, it seems, year in, year out. You've got Noel Thorpe, who's done brilliant things with Montreal's defense. Brett Monson, whose defense led a bunch of categories this year in Hamilton, including takeaways. And I think that's it. I don't think I missed any names. Those are the 10. I'll run down them one more time. There's Byron Archambault and Noel Thorpe, who are currently in Montreal, Henry Burris, who's stateside, Rick Campbell, who's in Ottawa, Pat Delmonico in Calgary, Ryan Dinwiddie in Toronto, Brett Monson in Hamilton, Mark Mueller in Sask, Michael O'Shea in Winnipeg, and Rolando Steinauer in Hamilton. I think those are the guys that you look at as a short list. And if I was a betting man, I would say that the next head coach of the Ottawa Redblacks is on this list somewhere.
To me, the top candidate is Mark Mueller. I think you need to go and find somebody who's young and up and coming. I think he's been a guy on that short list for a long time, and what he's been able to accomplish under Corey Mace in Saskatchewan with that offense, with Trevor Harris at the helm, I think bodes well for a future. It's always preferable in a league where there are very few elite offensive coordinators to go with an offensive guy as your head coach, because you kill two birds with one stone. As much as I like somebody like Byron Archambault as an up-and-coming candidate, you have to hire him and then find somebody to be your OC. Maybe he brings over Anthony Calvillo from Montreal or something like that, somebody who has some play-calling experience. But again, that is an if, not a guarantee. With Mark Mueller, I think you get everything that you want in one up-and-coming package. If it's not him, some of these established names are compelling to me. Mike O'Shea, is his time in Winnipeg coming to an end? It feels like things are souring a bit there, and his traditional policy of not re-upping until after the season makes him ripe for the picking. With all the organizational changes that have happened over the last few years, with the late Ted Gavaya leaving for Winnipeg or for Hamilton and whatever else may come in that front office, does O'Shea still feel like the Bombers are a team where he can have the most success? I think you have to explore that option. And Orlando Steinauer, as you laid out, I think that one is a very compelling candidate as well, because of the ties in with Burke and because he had so much success early on in his career as a head coach. The one name on this list that I know fans will clamor about, but I am more skeptical of, is Henry Burris. And the reason why is he has really put himself on this NCAA NFL track, right? And he has had some success with that, right? He is assistant head coach, co-OC at Florida A&M. That would seem to put him on the verge of a potential head coaching job down the road in the NCAA, certainly at the FCS level, potentially making the jump back to the NFL at some point. Would it be great for him to be a head coach in the CFL? Sure, but that's a different path, and it's harder to course correct. Not impossible, but harder to go back down south once you've essentially put your hands up and accepted a position in Canada. The other element at play there, guys, which I think needs to be stated from a human standpoint, is the reason why Burris is at Florida A&M, or part of the reason, is because his son is on that team. Armand Burris is a sophomore receiver for the Rattlers. Does he want to leave before his son is done in college? Maybe he does. Maybe that's not a big deal. Maybe his son says, go live your dreams, be a head coach. But there's something to be said for being able to coach your son at, a high level in college football. Very few people get that opportunity. I'm not sure that's something that Henry Burris will give up lightly.
Let's look at the other side of this, because JC, as you mentioned, I think Mark Mueller would be a smart hire, but does he actually want to go there? Like Mark Mueller, fair. I was told and found out and confirmed it with him on the Rider Broadcast Network, 620 CKRM, that he didn't even interview in BC last year for the head coach job. He's going to pick his spot. And if you're Mark Mueller, why would you go to Ottawa with the state the team's in? Well, you might go there if you really believed in Drew Brown, if indeed the team's going to stick with him. But you would think that Mark Mueller is going to want to become a head coach where he has a bona fide quarterback, or a young quarterback that he takes with him or plucks from somewhere else that he really believes in. Now, I don't know if he believes in Drew Brown or not, but I think that's the other part of this. And I think what needs to be said out loud about this Ottawa Redblacks football team is that Bob Dyce was not the only issue with this team. Okay? A lot of people don't want to hear it in the nation's capital or even say it, but the offense needs to be better. When you invest literally millions of dollars and probably more money on the offensive side of the football, and you're not getting the kind of production that you should for your investment, and he's treated me nicely, but from a professional standpoint, you have to look at Tommy Condell. So, I worry for Ottawa that, let's say some of these rumors that seem to be pertinent are true, and Orlando Steinauer ends up as the head coach in Ottawa. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that's what people are talking about behind the scenes. His good buddy is Tommy Condell. Then you keep him as the offensive coordinator. How are you getting better? And then how are you selling that to your fans? I think this extends out too. Like, Drew Brown seriously needs to be looked at as the quarterback going forward there in Ottawa for a potential starter. You talk to people around the league and they're like, if I was in Ottawa, assuming Cody Fajardo's not going to go there, which it seems like Cody Fajardo's either playing or either retiring or re-signing in Edmonton, then people are like, well, I think I'd rather have Dustin Crum. He's tough. He guts it out. He's shown maybe not as fast as you would want to, but improvement as a passer. We know he can do as a runner. And it's very clear that when he plays, the other guys around him are playing hard. I'm not saying that the guys don't play hard for Drew Brown, but there's some questions there, I think, in the locker room about how tough Drew Brown is. Now, he's right to go out and prove me wrong about this, but I think these are the kind of questions that you have to ask. And if you're Sean Burke sitting in that chair, you got to be thinking about these questions and then saying, okay, this could be my last hire here as a head coach or for a head coach if it doesn't work out well. So I just think these are some of the natural, honest questions that have to be asked about this football team if indeed OSEG and the Redblacks as a whole are serious about winning football. Like, if Orlando Steinauer actually proves to be the best option through this process, then I won't have an issue with it. But if it's relationship based and you're just going to run it back with him thinking that you can go back to that 2019 Ticats team, well, then we're going to talk about how it ended there in Hamilton, because it wasn't pretty for Orlando Steinauer, who, let's be honest, is up in the front office because they wanted a different head coach in there.
I think you raised some very valid points there, Dunk. And to sort of piggyback off your discussion regarding Drew Brown, the Redblacks did their end of season media availabilities yesterday, and we will have an article up on 3DownNation on this very topic shortly. But one of the things that was most interesting from those conversations, to me at least, was Sean Burke, when he was asked about Drew Brown. He seemed committed to him as a quarterback, but he acknowledged that playing 8 games when you're a starting franchise quarterback is not good enough. And then he said, that's not a Drew Brown issue. That's an organizational issue. And he went on to sort of imply that they need to address things like the way they practice and the effectiveness of their training staff, and seemed to point the finger in that direction as to why Drew Brown may have not been able to be at 100% all season. That surprised me a little bit.
But okay, why was Dustin Crum able to play consistently when called upon?
I think that's a valid enough question, right? I think there are things with Drew Brown where the injuries were nagging and he tried to play through it. So perhaps that's where the concerns with training staff or practice or how he was handled come into play for Burke. And again, he didn't come out and say our training staff is garbage or anything like that. He simply said, this is an organizational issue and these are the areas we need to change in order to address it. But that was an interesting comment, because right now I'm not sure there's a better option than Drew Brown out there as a quarterback. But right now, if you don't have him on the field, it doesn't matter if you have him under contract. You still don't have a quarterback. So that has to be addressed, whether it's Drew Brown specifically, whether it's the organization, whether it's just simply finding somebody else because Brown can't stay healthy. To me, that is the top question that the new head coach will have to answer before anything else.
The Edmonton Elks have a decision to make at quarterback. Speaking about the pivot position in the offseason, head coach Mark Killam indicated he wants Cody Fajardo behind center for his team to start the 2026 season, and Fajardo is interested in returning to the Elks, though he's unsure he'll continue his playing career. I think if you put $400,000 or more in front of him, you could probably change that thought pretty quick. Meanwhile, Trey Ford has an offseason roster bonus at $110,000 set for February 1st, with multiple people in the organization suggesting publicly, I can't even believe this, fellas, the Canadian quarterback might need a change of scenery. You're already kind of telling us what's going to happen before we even see the movie in a way. How do you expect the situation in Edmonton to play out?
Well, assuming Cody Fajardo doesn't retire, I think Cody Fajardo is going to be the franchise guy in 2026, and I think Trey Ford is going to be elsewhere. I don't think anybody is willing to trade for Trey Ford's current contract, but we did also see a situation last year where Edmonton and Montreal traded, I don't want to use the word disgruntled quarterbacks, but quarterbacks who had recently been demoted in McLeod Bethel Thompson and Cody Fajardo. And both pastors subsequently agreed to renegotiated contracts. So whether you're trading for Trey Ford with the understanding that you're going to renegotiate the deal, or whether you force Edmonton to cut Trey Ford and then he gets to pick wherever he wants to go, I think one of those two situations will play out. Do I think Cody Fajardo can get Edmonton to first place and bring them a Grey Cup? No. But I do think that Cody Fajardo would be a great stopgap and a guy who can get this team back to the playoffs, which they desperately need because this team has not been in the playoffs since the pandemic. And frankly, Elks fans deserve way better, at least the ones who are left in the building. They just posted their worst attendance figure in over 55 years. So credit to those hardcores who are still showing up, still supporting the team. Those are the folks who deserve better. And hopefully as this team improves, a bunch of the people who stopped coming to Commonwealth Stadium will start coming back. 7-11, same record as they had last year. I do think the foundation this team has built is a little better than the one that they had last year. I think the coaching staff is better, certainly on the defensive side of the ball. That being said, I mean, this year I think Cody Fajardo was, I thought he was adequate. I don't think he was great, right? We saw what happened in BC when he tried pushing the football down the field. It didn't go well. Now, I also don't think the Elks have a great receiving core. I'd actually venture to say it's probably bottom 2 in the league alongside Winnipeg's right now. But regardless.
It's the worst, man.
Probably.
Cody Fajardo would rather have Ontario Wilson and Nick Dembski and Carrick Wheatfall and Kevin Sclaircy out there for sure.
Fair. I mean, I think Kalen Julian Grant and Curly Gittins Jr. are two really good Canadians. But the American side, I think, is where they're hurting a little bit in Edmonton.
If you polled 100 CFL fans and asked them to name one American receiver currently on the Edmonton Elks, how many of them do you think could actually do it?
The same number who could hit a fastball at a Major League Baseball game. But in all seriousness, let's get into this. Trey Ford in 2026. I think the BC Lions would make a ton of sense. This is a team that doesn't really have that developmental guy right now. They're a team that doesn't have a Canadian backup for Nathan Rourke, who's obviously going to be the guy there for the foreseeable future. Dare I say the next decade. I also think that other situations that might make sense for Trey Ford, Hamilton, if Taylor Powell leaves, I think that would be a great fit. He's from Niagara Falls, kind of a local tie there. The Toronto Argonauts, though, are loaded. Saskatchewan, I think they're full. Winnipeg, if Jarius Jackson is the OC in Winnipeg next year, I'm not sure I see that. Jackson and Ford did have a solid finish together in Edmonton to 2024, but I also don't think they were thick as thieves either. Like, I think they were kind of a fine arranged marriage. I'm not sure Jarius Jackson would be clamoring to say, yeah, let's go get Trey Ford to be our new Chris Streveler. It's possible, but I'm not sure. The other part of this equation, too, is part of the reason Tyrell Ford signed in Edmonton was to play with his twin brother. And if you're ditching one, what happens to the other, especially given how much money Tyrell Ford is making? Played well in 2025, but he wasn't all CFL this year like he was in 2024. Lots of decisions to be made in Edmonton. I think the nice thing for the Elks this offseason is you're going to see a lot less turnover, right? I think in hindsight, they probably did too much turnover, probably did too much in free agency. I think they would have fared better if they'd not done as much, especially considering their best defensive players were J.J. Ross and Kenneth Logan Jr., neither of whom were big free agent signings, unlike a ton of the other guys they brought in. But regardless, I think that is how things will play out in Edmonton.
Yeah,
there should be a lot of teams looking at Trey Ford.
Well, and that is
a backup.
I mean, and we just talked about it with Drew Brown. The market right now for quarterbacks, and Trey Ford is not a pending free agent, but let's pretend he is, because for all intents and purposes, he is, given that it's clear he's not going to be back at Edmonton. At least to me, it's clear he's not going to be back at Edmonton. There's not a lot of guys. Like Chris Streveler is the only free agent in Winnipeg. I think Jake Mayer is free in Saskatchewan, but like, did Jake Mayer do anything to for anybody to go, wow, he's a franchise guy. Like, no, there are some young guys in Ottawa who, have shown flashes, but not really proven anything. McLeod Bethel Thompson had a down year. Jeremiah Masoli, I think, kind of shown that time is probably up for him as a CFL quarterback. PJ Walker, I thought struggled. Right? Like there's not a lot of quarterbacks when you look across the league going, man, that's the next guy. Man, that's the next guy.
That's what I mean. There should be a lot of teams in on Trey Ford.
But that does certainly raise Trey Ford's stock. That is a good point. It's not like he's the third or fourth ranked quarterback going into this offseason who's available. He's almost certainly number one, barring an unforeseen circumstance.
He started games, and I know he wasn't necessarily great that last one where he got benched, but I believe in his career, he's thrown more touchdowns than interceptions, has starting experience. And I still think there's some upside there. If he gets with, I'm not saying the guys he's been with haven't been, but a quarterback whisperer. And I'm not saying he's going to end up in these places, but like, could you imagine him with Mark Mueller or Ryan Dinwiddie or Scott Milanovic? I don't think he's Scott Milanovic's type of quarterback, but if he gets with somebody like that and can really, truly learn how to approach his craft as a pro, I think there is upside there. Hodge, you laid it out. Like, going to BC makes a lot of sense. To have a Canadian backup, he's sort of a similar style to Rourke too. He's definitely a faster runner than Rourke, but he's got that dual threat ability. If he was with Buck Pierce, I think that could be the quarterback whisperer type of person. Like, honestly, it seems weird to think, because coming into this segment, I'm like, we're talking about people being down on Trey Ford in Edmonton, but he could be the hottest commodity as a backup in the Canadian Football League. I think one other quarterback we should add to the equation would be Dustin Crum. There are teams around the league who are really high on what Dustin Crum did in a flat-out terrible situation in Ottawa, the way that he battled. So he's going to get some love. I think when you look at the quarterbacks who teams are going to be after as coveted backups, to me, it's those two, and then the list thins out pretty quickly, and people should know that Nick Arbuckle is indeed under contract with the Toronto Argonauts for the 2026 season. I don't know why, but when they initially announced it, it was said to be just a one-year deal. I've confirmed with multiple sources it's a 2-year deal, so he's going to be the backup in Toronto. Other than that, all the other teams who don't have a qualified backup that they love should be looking at Trey Ford and Dustin Crum.
Trey Ford in BC, to me, makes the most sense because the ratio element of it pushes it over the top. Now, it cannot, under any circumstances, be at the current dollar figure, right? And if you're making a trade, that could be a little bit risky for the team to just turn around and cut him. It's going to have to be with the understanding through his agent that there's a renegotiation coming down the pipe, similar to what it was with McLeod Bethel Thompson and Cody Fajardo last year. We've seen that before, but I think the Lions are the best landing spot. I think the Lions are also a fit because you get to sit behind Nathan Rourke. And whether it's true or not, Rourke gets painted often, or Ford gets painted like the anti-Rourke in terms of his mentality in the building. I'm not there every day. I don't know what Trey Ford is like on the day-to-day with the Edmonton Elks, but we've now had 2 different organizations that have soured on him and haven't seemed convinced by his commitment level as a backup.
Let's say regimes, not organizations.
Regimes. That's fair. And I think it was telling when Cody Fajardo spoke to the media yesterday, and he was asked about what Trey Ford has to do differently to become a starter in the CFL in the future. And he didn't say anything about, the way he reads a defense or, getting the ball out of his hand or not running around so much or doing whatever. He said he needs to show his teammates his emotions, that he cares, that he's motivated. He said, I know he is. I know he loves football, but sometimes he needs to show that to everyone else. That suggests to me that there are doubts in the building. And I've heard from multiple people familiar with the situation who have been in and out of Edmonton over the last few years that they have not been happy with Trey Ford, especially when he has not been the starter. That has to change because he's not going to be a starter next year. And I think pairing him up with someone like Nathan Rourke could be an incredible way for him to learn some of that stuff because Nathan Rourke works harder than anybody. I think all the quarterbacks out there that he's been with, the Trevor the Cody Fajardos of the world, the McLeod Bethel Thompsons. Yeah, they grind the tape. They're in there. They're leaders. I'm not questioning that. But Nathan Rourke, after practice, is running sprints because he doesn't think quarterbacks run enough.
I mean, we can't say that for sure. Okay, that's your speculation.
Fair enough.
Let's not paint that brush on everybody because Trevor Harris works pretty hard. Believe I'm down the list.
I'm not saying he doesn't. Okay? I'm like Rourke is, in my opinion, I will say this, in another tier simply from the physical work standpoint. I think there's lots of guys in that same mental work.
But that's also hard to verify, JC. I get it's your opinion. It is hard,
but it's my opinion. And I think from what I've heard of Trey Ford, he could use learning from that in the physical standpoint. That he needs to show that. He needs to show that grind. I think he would be forced to if he was in BC.
There are a couple controversial calls in Week 21 as the Edmonton Elks lost a touchdown when Justin Rankin fumbled at the 1-yard line, and there was no immediate recovery, though the Stampeders eventually picked up the ball. Possession was then awarded to Calgary at their 30-yard line. Meanwhile, in Regina, Keon Hatcher fumbled at the goal line, and the ball was recovered by Tavon Campbell, who took it back 108 yards for a score. Upon review, however, the play was blown dead near the goal line, giving Saskatchewan possession but negating Campbell's big return. Does the CFL have an officiating problem?
No, the CFL does not have an officiating problem. I know people like to harp on the referees, but CFL refs are not noticeably worse than refs in any other league. In fact, I would argue, in general, they're pretty damn good. Now, were there mistakes made here? Absolutely. But in the face of these mistakes, I would argue that the correct recoveries were made for the mistakes. Inadvertent whistles. That's going to happen. Now, do they happen regularly throughout the year? Are we getting an abundance of inadvertent whistles? No. Unfortunately, we had 2 this week that were pretty significant. But when you've got a bunch of guys with whistles in their mouth trying to make split-second decisions, sometimes somebody's going to blow a little bit early. That happens. That's why it's in the rule book. And when that happens, if there's a fumble that's determined on review, it is awarded to the team that makes a clear and obvious recovery at the spot where they recovered it, because it cannot be advanced. That is not fair. Okay? In the Calgary situation, I think you can make the argument that too much time elapsed between the fumble and the recovery. I've seen that situation not called that way before, but Calgary did pick up that football. There was, in fact, a clear and obvious recovery, and when it happens in the end zone, that brings it out to the 30-yard line. You can dispute the timing, but the call, in terms of who got the ball, was correct if you agree that's a clear and obvious recovery. In BC, it's a terrible, or for BC and Saskatchewan, it's a terrible, terrible mistake by the official that took points off the board for Saskatchewan. Nobody is disputing that. I don't think the referee themselves would say it wasn't a mistake. I'm sure he feels like garbage. But you can't advance the ball past that point. And when we all heard that whistle, we knew that it was going to be at the 3-yard line and that touchdown wasn't going to count. That's the only way that that play can be officiated when the mistake is made. There's not a rash of inadvertent whistles in this league. It's not a persistent problem. It happened on 2 plays this week by coincidence, and I think the recovery from the officials afterwards was correct in both circumstances.
The issue that Rider fans have is the fact that the whistle was blown, and based on talking to some people around that game, there was a thought that the officials felt like it was a touchdown, but it didn't seem like it was close. And how do you not allow the play to be finished when Keon Hatcher has the ball over his head and isn't anywhere close to the ground? I get that these things happen, and I do think, JC, that you're right. The officials got the letter of the law rule correct in both of these situations, but that kind of stuff just simply cannot happen. You know, I'll take it one step further here. I'm not necessarily calling for officials to make themselves available to the media, but players have to face the music. Coaches have to face the music. General managers have to face the music. Presidents, owners, we don't hear from them as much as we would like, but hopefully that changes in the future. They all got to face the music. When a call like this, and hopefully it doesn't happen in the postseason, happens, it affects people's livelihoods. So I get it's an inadvertent whistle, but there needs to be, I think, some repercussions for that, because there are going to be repercussions for the staff, the coaches, the players in the future when these calls happen. People could lose their jobs. Now, I'm not saying that the officials don't take it seriously. I talk to a lot of passionate officials, and we haven't really talked about CFL officiating much this season, which for the most part means that they've done a great job. I think people would like to see the command center up its game, but alas, at least for this situation, I think there at least needs to be perhaps a better explanation, and I don't know how you necessarily go about that. Like, I thought Corey Mace did a great job on the Rider Broadcast Network post-game show of explaining what the referee said to him. So at least the official's perspective is out there. I'm not asking for the head official to go on a diatribe on TSN to explain every single thing, but when a big call happens like that, in a game that for Saskatchewan doesn't even mean anything, but there's a lot on the line for BC, I think people at least just want an explanation, and then they can be mad or have their opinions otherwise. So that's where I come in at this, because actually I saw one of the officials who worked that game on my flight back from Regina to Toronto, and I noticed him because I was like, somebody's looking at coach's tape. And I was like, what's going on? I got to see who this guy is. And I asked him, like, well, what happened on the play? And you could tell he didn't want to say anything, which was smart. And it's not like I'm going to single him out, but there should at least be able to be, whether it's on the record or off the record, when you talk to fans about it, an explanation for what happened, because that call was made. And again, people's lives are affected. So the officiating, by and large part, has been great. Also, I do think that Keon Hatcher touchdown catch was actually a catch. I get the nose of the football was touching the turf, but he had control, both hands under it, and that constitutes a catch in the CFL rulebook.
Yeah, I feel for officials because I feel like fans are like, well, I can think of 5 different times this year the officials have made a mistake and therefore they suck. It's like, well, if you judge like the CFL between 81 regular season games has tens of thousands of plays, and if you judge the 5 worst plays from players or the 5 worst calls from coaches, then I guess that means everybody sucks. Like, it's not fair to say, well, these are the 5 worst ones, therefore they're bad. I think CFL officiating is actually pretty darn good. But yes, this was a mistake. You got to eat the whistle at this point, at that point. And by the way, if you blow the whistle and the play is dead, I think you then have to jump all over the play and stop it, because I think half the problem here with the Devon Campbell return was that Devon Campbell, even though the whistle had blown, was able to run all the way to the end zone, and then you got the fans celebrating and the fireworks go off and everyone's going, yeah, the 6 points get put up on the board. That just makes it all the more crappy when then the officials have to come out and say, well, the replay center correctly identified that a whistle was blown. We're sorry. Like, if the play is blown dead, all the officials need to start wailing on those whistles and waving their arms in the air to stop everything that's going on. It would still sting, obviously, because the play should have kept going, but at least then you save what I think is a big optics problem, which is where all the fans get up in their seats, they're going nuts because their team has scored a touchdown, they're rightfully excited, only for it to come off the clock. So if you're going to blow the whistle early, which you're not supposed to do, but if it happens, double down and stop the play at all costs, because you've already made one mistake. Don't make it worse by letting the play run on for, an extra 10 seconds, and heaven forbid somebody gets injured or whatever. Like, help the fans understand, right? I think the reason fans get angry is because they're confused, right? Confusion leads to anger a lot of the time. So try to explain it. And I agree with Justin. I would love for officials to be available after the game, or even just have a weekly report that comes out on every Monday. These were 3 calls that we want to address, and this is why they were correct. Because as a member of the media, I like to learn more all the time about this game and the way it's officiated, the way that it's played. This is a game you could be involved in football for 100 years and still learn something new every single day. You're never going to max out your knowledge of this game. So yeah, this was a controversial call. This is why it happened, and this is why it was correct. Or these were 2 calls that were controversial. This is why one was correct and why one was not correct, and we're going to fix that. Because we know officials do that to teams all the time. They privately say, yeah, you know what, we messed that up, we apologize. Just have some transparency. I would like to see that. Maybe the league doesn't want the bad press, or what they perceive to be bad press, of saying, hey, our officials made a mistake. But I don't think anybody should no reasonable person should expect any officials, or anybody for that matter, in any role, to be perfect, because we're all human beings at the end of the day. Nobody's perfect. Well, except for JC when it comes to hitting Major League Baseball pitches. But other than that, the rest of us are not
I
perfect.
don't think I ever claimed to be perfect.
I know. I'm just teasing you.
I think there's two important things, because I'm all with you guys in terms of transparency. I think anytime you can add more transparency to your game in critical moments, you are better off for it, right? But we need to acknowledge, first of all, Doug, you said there has to be consequences. I think there already are consequences for officials, right? It's a performance-based position. They are evaluated by the CFL. Their assignments for games are dictated by that. And, I don't know which official blew that whistle or what the rest of their season looked like, but, he could maybe not be getting a playoff game because of that, because of how that affected his grading, which means he's not getting a check for those important games and getting shown in prime time. Like those are performance-based punishments or rewards for officials that already exist. And I think we need to acknowledge that they take place. I also think we need to acknowledge that, yes, I would love to see the officials stand up and take questions after every game. These guys are not full-time employees. Like coaches, players, team presidents, general managers, these are salaried positions. These guys are employees of their clubs. Being an official, even in the NFL, but in the CFL as well, is a part-time job, right? These guys do other work and they do this on top of it, which seems ridiculous to say, considering, all the work that they put in, all the training that they have, all the expertise that they have, and then the pressure placed atop their shoulders. But for all intents and purposes, they're at the same level as the person working the concession that night at Mosaic Stadium. That's not their full-time gig, right? And so if we want to put higher expectations on officials than we already do and ask more of them, then they need to be compensated accordingly. And I'm a strong believer that officials, if you want great officiating, you need full-time officials in sports, right? So I think that's important to state. At the same time, I understand the feelings of confusion and resentment and anger at this play, because we cannot understate how impactful it is. If Tavon Campbell is allowed to score here, there's a relatively good chance that the Riders win this game. It will bring up two scores, fairly significant in that football contest, which was decided by 6 points. If Saskatchewan wins that game, BC becomes the crossover team, right? They're going to Montreal and Calgary is hosting Winnipeg. I think you can realistically state, and again, there's lots to be worked out now, that one inadvertent whistle had an impact on who will be in the Grey Cup game and who will be the eventual champion in the CFL, because it impacted the playoff matchups and who's going where, and some massive travel implications for BC. That's how important officials are, and they're generally right. But we need to give them the resources and compensate them accordingly to make those calls. And to be frank, I don't think fans give referees enough grace and enough understanding and enough respect for the work that they do. And I don't think leagues do either, because we take them for granted and we're all too happy to throw them under the bus.
Yeah, anybody who goes to games just to boo the refs, I'd invite them to invite a random person to their workplace who stands in the corner of their office or whatever it is and just harasses them for an 8-hour shift. That would be, I'm not saying don't boo on a bad call. I think that's fair. You paid your money. It's your right to boo. But if your default is just to hate refs and say that they suck, well, invite someone down to your auto dealership when you're trying to sell a car who stands there beside the client going, "You suck. A monkey could sell a car. You're the worst salesperson ever. Open your eyes." It would not be fun. It would last about 3 minutes before you'd want to punch the person in the face.
It's now time for JC's random neglister. And the last time I was on the pod, boys, or Hodge, because Dunk wasn't on, you gave me some flack. You said you really go for the deep dives. You never go for the easy stuff. They truly are random neglisters. That wounded me deeply, Hodge. And I thought about
That's the
giving
segment,
you...
though, Hodge. Don't hate on him. It's his
I
segment.
don't actually remember saying this, so I will just not comment.
I'm just giving you a hard time. But I thought this week I'd go with a more recognizable name. And then I thought better of it and went with a more recognizable last name, although you might not know the player. I assume you guys are all familiar with Stephon Gilmore, yes?
Yes.
Former NFL Defensive Player of the Year, All-Pro, one of the best cornerbacks of the current century. Yes, we all know him. Did you know that he has a brother, Stephen Gilmore Jr. out of Marshall, who is currently on the BC Lions neglist. Now, unfortunately for Stephen, unlike Stefan, he's not 6 foot and 190 pounds. He's 5'9" and 174 pounds. But this is a guy who runs a 4.44 40-yard dash and who has much of the same athletic gifts as his older brother. He had a cup of coffee in the NFL with both Detroit and Arizona, but most recently played meaningful games for the Birmingham Stallions of the UFL, 11 games for them in 2024 in their run through the playoffs, 43 tackles, 13 defensive stops, 8 pass breakups, and an interception as one of the best cornerbacks in that league. And going back to his time at Marshall, his final year there, he had an 88.1 PFF grade in his senior season. This is a guy who's great in zone coverage, has athleticism, quick trigger, isn't afraid to get his nose dirty, even though he's a smaller guy. I think there's a lot of comparables here to the success that the BC Lions have had with a guy like Robert Carter Jr., who graded out very similarly in college and has very similar athletic attributes and stature. Stephen Gilmore just has a little bit more pedigree. They've had him on their neg list for over a year now. I think he's a guy they'd like to bring up in the future. And maybe we get Stefan Gilmore out to a CFL game in Vancouver in the future as well.
I just hope that Stephen Gilmore and Stefan Gilmore have a sister, Stephanie Gilmore. That would be great. The time for Hodge's Heritage Moment. On this day in 2020, David Braley passed away at the age of 79. The native of Burlington, Ontario, purchased the BC Lions in 1997 and owned the team until his death. The Lions won 3 Grey Cups under Braley's ownership and enjoyed a resurgence in the Vancouver marketplace for the initial half of his tenure. The Hamilton Tiger Cats and Toronto Argonauts were also owned by Braley at some point, with the Argos winning a Grey Cup at home in 2012. It's also true that Braley owned the Lions and Argonauts simultaneously for a period of about 5 years. Were it not for his work as an owner, interim commissioner, and chairman of the Board of Governors, it is possible the CFL would not exist today without David Braley's contributions. And I can't believe it, fellas, that it's been 5 years since David Braley passed away. It feels like this happened like 18 months ago.
It truly does, and it cannot be understated. For as much as people like to point to the end of his tenure as the Lions owner and how that franchise degraded a little bit and how much work Amar Doman had to do to revitalize it, the CFL would not exist without David Braley. I think we can say that definitively. I think you can make the argument that he is perhaps the most impactful figure in league history in terms of what he did to keep it afloat, to own multiple teams, and that will always be his legacy in my mind.
Let's get to my Canadian quarterback for the week, boys. We're going to go out to JC's neck of the woods, University of British Columbia, who were on the road in Regina, a game I called alongside my buddy Darren Dupont on the Canada West Football Showcase, because Drew Vioto led a 15-point comeback with just over 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Season on the line to get the Thunderbirds into the Canada West playoffs with a 3-5 record. Doesn't sound great, but hey, the Rams won the Hardy Cup last year with a 3-5 record. He went off. By he, I mean Vioto. Completed 34 of 52 passes for 423 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception, including some key throws down the stretch and then into overtime as UBC won 31-29 in a great Canadian University tilt. And part of the reason it was so great, those final 3 minutes. So Stuart Johnston, I hope you don't mess that up with your new fancy 35-second play clock in the CFL, because the ending to this game was right up there with a bunch that I've seen across Canadian University and the CFL as well. Shout out to Trey Montour, who had a massive game for UBC, including a touchdown to give them the opportunity to get the 2-point convert, which he caught, by the way, and then go into overtime and kick a walk-off winning field goal. What a performance from Vioto, who is a Sault Ste. Marie native, goes about 6'3", 230, and he got the nickname when he was down in the NCAA, the Canadian Cannon. And let me tell you, JC, I'm sure you've seen this. When you see this kid throw live and he has a chance to step into it, There is a lot of zip on that football. So if he can get himself in some tip-top shape, an intriguing quarterback to watch down the line who might have some pro potential. Let's go to the 3-minute drill. Chris Streveler appeared to suffer a serious lower body injury in the first quarter during Winnipeg's loss to the Montreal Alouettes in Week 21. Do you think we've seen the last of Streveler with the Bombers or even in the CFL?
Streveler did an incredible job rehabbing his torn ACL, MCL, and partly torn PCL last year. So I'm never going to count him out, but I am doubtful that we'll see him back in Winnipeg and possibly the CFL at all. He was on crutches post-game. I saw him in the locker room, shook his hand, wished him well. And look, it's easy to criticize what Chris Streveler did, especially after his first start this year. Yeah, it's true he did not play very well, but he is a professional, he is a hard worker, and he has the respect of everybody in that organization. And you hate to see a guy suffer this type of injury at any time, especially when he just rehabbed. It seems it's a knee injury, that same injury. It's not confirmed, but he just rehabbed that same left knee last year. That's heartbreaking stuff. The Guelph Griffins beat the number 3 nationally ranked Western Mustangs with a walk-off rouge, which has gone viral, by the way. I'm seeing it all over social media. This marks the first time since 2003 the Mustangs will not win a playoff game. What happened at the end of this one?
Well, Guelph was down by 14 points, scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to march all the way back, and then lined up for a 43-yarder to win the game. Missed the field goal to the left, but it didn't go out of the back of the end zone. Seth Robertson, a receiver for Western, fielded the ball and inexplicably decided to try and return it out and then stepped out of bounds inside the end zone out the right side, giving Guelph the single point they needed to win the game. It was an absolutely absurd scenario. And if you have not seen the video of this call yet, both in terms of the broadcast call, but also the background noise, which I believe was people shouting from the coach's booth next door in both rage and confusion at what had just happened. Please give it a watch with the volume turned up because it is absolutely incredible.
Because why, JC? They were asking the question, why did he
punt the
not
ball?
kick the football? Yes.
Well, and also somebody loudly yelled, "Let's effing go!" Like, it was just awesome. It's really
chaos and amazing.
It's on my feed if you want to see it. Just go to my Twitter feed.
The CFL moved up the start time of the East and West semifinals to avoid overlap with a possible Game 7 in, sorry, I got to make sure I'm getting this right, the World Series? Is that? I don't know what that is.
That's actually pronounced Series. World Series.
Oh, the World Series. Okay, the World Series. Got it. Was that a smart move?
I was going to lay a chirp down on you, but I think you just brought on a whole lot of hate on yourself, man. There are literally millions of Canadians watching this. And
bring it on.
If it did get to a Game 7 in the World Series, there's a chance that that could be the highest rated sports broadcast in Canadian sports history, JC. Yes, for the World Series. Okay, so this was a smart decision by the Canadian Football League. I would argue that it could have been even moved up another hour to avoid any crossover with a potential Game 7, but at least there was foresight from the CFL to avoid a lot of the possible crossover if a Game 7 happens between the Los Angeles Dodgers and Toronto Blue Jays, Canada's MLB team. Hodge, you reported CFL attendance rose 0.6% in 2025. Is that a big deal, little deal, or no deal at all?
I think it's a little deal. I mean, obviously you want to trend in the right direction, which the CFL has since returning to the field in 2021. It's also interesting that this year the CFL officially recaptured the mark it was at pre-pandemic. The attendance this year was a tiny fraction of a percent higher than it was in 2019. That said, I think we can all agree, especially looking at some of the lower markets in the league, that being Edmonton, Ottawa, and most of Toronto, we need to get more butts in seats in those key markets. Things in Winnipeg, obviously sensational. Saskatchewan and BC are in good shape, though there's still room for improvement there. But the bottom end teams, the ones who aren't even hitting 20,000, that's got to improve. All 9 teams unveiled their award winners this past week, formulating the ballots for divisional awards. Was there anything wrong? We already know how you feel about Jalen Hutchings. That voters got wrong, JC. Outside of
my second rant would be the guy I would have put number 2 as my second choice for most outstanding defensive player in the entire league, which is Montreal Alouettes linebacker Tyrese Beverette, who did not get his team's nomination for most outstanding defensive player. Instead, it went to Isaac Adeyemi Berglund, the Canadian defensive end. And no disrespect to Adeyemi Berglund. He's got a lot of sacks. He's an effective player. But I think some of those sacks are cleanup sacks. I don't think he's necessarily in the elite category when it comes to down pressure. And Tyrese Beverette is in a category unto himself right now as a linebacker in the CFL. I think that used to belong to Wynton McManus, that title. I think with McManus's injuries over the past couple of years, Beverette has seized it. He is elite in coverage. He's elite against the run. There is nothing this guy can't do, and there's nothing he didn't do this year. The fact that he is not a finalist for most outstanding defensive player award, for the most outstanding defensive player award, let alone a team nominee, is frankly absurd. The CFL and the CFLPA have agreed to a settlement that will see every team get a $50,000 salary cap exemption this year. What prompted that?
I'll try to lay this down in simple terms. So essentially, the Players Association would like the salary cap money to go to the players who are actually playing and not players who are being rested on the one-game injured list with the designation of load management. So that's how this came about, and it does make some sense when you look at it overall, and I still think it's something that there could be ongoing dialogue about in the future.
For Justin Dunk and JC Abbott, I'm John Hodge. We thank you as always for listening to the 3DownNation podcast. If you haven't already, go down to 3downnation.com, sign up for our newsletter, all kinds of fun tidbits, trivia, insight, and analysis in that bad boy. And of course, you can unsubscribe at any time. We will see you later this week for our picks, though I think we've already kind of tipped them a little bit, JC, for the East and West semifinals. And then, of course, we'll be back with Justin to chop up the first round of the CFL playoffs and preview the East and West finals. Until then, we'll see you.